Welcome back, third graders. Today we're going to be learning about leadership decisions. So this is another lesson about government and how that leadership or government impacts citizens. So let's do a quick flashback of what we learned last week. Last week, we discussed how leaders in different countries are chosen. We learned that some leaders are voted in, like in a democracy. They gain power through their families, like in a monarchy, or a king or queen. They take over the country, like in a dictatorship, or they're chosen by a group of people, like in an oligarchy. These are the type of governments we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks. We are going to keep on building on our knowledge of government and learn how these leaders can impact their citizens' lives. So before we can start, we have to talk about our target. We have 2 targets today. Our first target is, I can describe what countries can do if they do not like the decisions their leader is making. So to describe means to explain or to show. So we're going to be able to explain what countries can do if they do not like the decisions the leader is making. Our second target is, I can compare 2 stories about government to determine what people can do to change their government. So what we're going to do, we're going to read 2 different stories from 2 different countries and compare them, see how they're different or see how they're the same, and how their citizens can change their government or what they have to do. So our focus question today is, what can happen when leaders make decisions that people do not like? So we're going to figure out what happens or what people can do if they don't like the decisions their leader is making. So let's talk about some differences between governments and what we know already. There are a lot of differences between governments. Some governments allow for citizens to have a say by voting or electing their leaders, like in the United States. Other governments believe that people or citizens should have no say at all. This happens a lot in dictatorships. When citizens do not like a decision that is made, some countries allow citizens to vote on a new leader. This usually happens in the United States or in a democracy. Other countries make citizens deal with the choices. Today, we are going to look at 2 different stories and determine the difference of how citizens can change the government. Our first story is going to be about a country called Thailand. The story is called Imitating the Movie Mockingjay. Protesters get arrested in Thailand. Life is imitating a movie in Thailand. Students there are using a hand signal from the Hunger Games movies to protest against the military. Now officials have banned the three-finger salute and have arrested young demonstrators for using it. 3 students in the capital, Bangkok, were arrested in a movie theater showing The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. The students were the last protesters accused of using a hand gesture from the movie. Mockingjay is the newest movie based on the books by Susan Collins about teens fighting a tyrant. Thailand's military took over the government on May 22nd and cut back freedoms, including the right to protest. The military said it was necessary to restore order after months of protests. Using symbols against military rule. In 2013, Thailand was hit by demonstrations for and against the last prime minister. People against the prime minister called his government dishonest and corrupt and said it should go. Supporters said that government was elected by the people and should stay. Groups of 5 or more people have been banned since the military took over. Young people are frustrated by not being able to get together and demand more freedoms. Many young protesters are using symbols to protest the military rule. Some are reading 1984, George Orwell's novel about a fight against a dictatorship, openly in public. Premieres of Mockingjay were canceled at 2 Bangkok movie theaters. Student organizers had bought up hundreds of tickets. They planned to give tickets away and gas people against the military. A colonel with the city's police said the 3 students were arrested, were taken to an army camp for attitude adjustment. The Chinese government held back Mockingjay from the country's theaters until next year, said the magazine Variety. It wasn't clear if that was because of the movie's popularity with pro-democracy activists. Chinese officials have been dealing with protests for greater democracy in Hong Kong for over a month. Ruin their future. In Thailand, 5 other student protesters were arrested for using the 3-finger salute. They used it during a speech by the army's leader, Prayuth Chan-o-cha. Prayuth told reporters that it only bothered him when the students used a hand sign because it could ruin their future. Prayuth also said that restrictions from freedoms will continue until the time is right to lift them. Of human rights criticized the government. They said banning symbols of protest is going too far. Matilda Bogner, a United Nations human rights official, called it a human rights violation. It shuts down people's right to speak out, she said. Life in Thailand is growing more absurd by the day, John Sifton wrote in a Twitter post. He works for the group Human Rights Watch. If Prayuth's government is that afraid of young people imitating a movie, that is a sign that things need to change, Sifton wrote. So let's take a little recap about the Thailand story we just read. Citizens did not like the decisions that their leader was making, so they began to protesting using symbols. However, this led them to getting in trouble, and the government started to restrict the freedoms of the people. People are still fighting for change in the country. So we learned that people in Thailand were trying to protest against the new military government. The military government took away the right to protest. So this made people get in a lot of trouble and be arrested for the decisions that they're making. This is pretty unfair to their citizens. The next story that we're going to read is from Hong Kong. This story is called Thousands Protest in Hong Kong on Monday for Free Elections. Thousands of protesters blocked the street of Hong Kong on Monday. The protesters are calling for the Chinese government to give them free elections. Hong Kong is a territory of 7 million people on China's south coast. It was long ruled by the British. In 1997, power was transferred to China. The Chinese government promised that the government of Hong Kong would be able to govern the territory for at least 50 years. Hong Kong's people enjoy more freedoms than people in mainland China. Now, the territory is protesting because China announced new election rules at the end of the summer. The rules would limit free elections. Only a people approved by the Chinese government could run for election as Hong Kong's top official in 2017. People in Hong Kong are unhappy over other issues as well. These include high housing prices. There is also a growing income gap between the rich and poor. In addition, young protesters don't feel connected to mainland China. Instead, they feel a strong sense that they are Hong Kongers. Protesters blocked the streets. Monday's demonstrations forced schools, banks, and other businesses to close. Government officials said they would stop the plans for a big fireworks celebration on Wednesday. The holiday marks the founding of China. The protesters demonstrated in neighborhoods throughout Hong Kong. They sat down on roadways and blocked streets. Police backed away from fighting directly with the demonstrators. On Sunday, police had fired tear gas at protesters. Tear gas is a chemical that irritates the eyes. It is used to break up protests. The Chinese government had warned that the demonstrations could cause serious damage to Hong Kong businesses. Some workers refused to work in support of the protesters. Also, a number of businesses opened late or closed early, but for the most part, business went on as usual. The protests were started over the summer by a group called Occupy Central. What will happen next? Chai Kung Choi is a professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Choi said that protests have become much more widespread. No one seems to be in control. Choi said he does not know what will happen next. However, to get the protesters off the streets, government officials will have to give in to some of their demands, he said. Western governments are concerned about the situation, but they have been careful about showing support for the protesters. Hou Chunying is a spokeswoman for the Chinese government. She warned other countries not to interfere. Hong Kong belongs to China, she said. We strongly oppose any countries interfering or supporting Occupy Central by any methods. This is a people's movement. In Hong Kong, demonstrations are usually well organized and calm. The wildness of the protest has surprised people. It has also encouraged many people to stand with the protesters. Jerry Ip is 25 years old. He and a few friends were tear gassed by police Sunday night. He said, "I felt like I'd die." Even so, Ip said he would not give up. We're fighting for the future of Hong Kong. This is our homeland. Hong Kong's government has tried to calm the situation. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying is the top official in Hong Kong. He promised that police would treat protesters with respect. He also said that he hoped people would keep calm. Leung said government officials would soon hold talks about the election rules. Then on Monday, he took it back. He said the government would listen to what people think another time. A local lawmaker named Alan Leung said that people in Hong Kong were going to be upset about this decision. This is a people's movement, he said. Let's do a quick recap on what we learned about Hong Kong. Hong Kong citizens are asking for free elections. This means anyone can run for a government position. This is the type of government that they had before, where anyone could run for a government position or the leadership. But now China decided that Hong Kong could no longer have those free elections. So people have begun to protest. The leaders keep making promises and then breaking those promises about changing the government. The leaders are not listening to what the people want. What is similar and different between our two stories? Now this is when we can say we met our target by comparing the two stories. In both Thailand and Hong Kong, citizens are upset with the government's decisions. So the citizens in both countries started to protest against their governments. Many citizens are getting arrested or getting hurt. Not many changes are being made, even though their citizens don't like the leadership that they have, and they're trying very hard to protest against it. In Thailand, the military took over the government and took away many rights, like the right to protest. In Hong Kong, the government is taking away free elections. This is how the two are different. They're the same by they both have protesting, and they're different because they're protesting different things. So let's review our target. I can describe what countries can do if they do not like the decisions their leader is making. So what we learned about today is if citizens don't like what their leadership is doing, they can protest. So we learned that in Hong Kong and in Thailand that they protest against their government to see and try to get what they want. We also have I can compare two stories about government to determine what people can do to change their government. So we compared the two different stories about government in Thailand and Hong Kong, and how that in both their citizens are protesting to try to get what they want in their government and in their leadership. We also learned that it's not really working yet, but they're still trying to fight for what they want. Hopefully, in a few years, they'll get what they want and need for their leadership. Now it is your turn. Answer the following questions based on this video. Remember, you can always come back to rewatch this video or go back and watch a different video on government to help you answer the questions. Upcoming. Next week, or our next social studies lesson, we will discuss how the U.S. government is different in how our government allows people or citizens to make changes by electing a new leader. We'll discuss some more differences between governments and how the citizens have a role. Thank you for listening. Good luck, and I'll see you guys next time.